that the pastor asked me to do this. Yeah, I've been coming since April of 2012. It was originally just to come and tell a friend that I went. It was stupid. I would have to go again and she would stop asking me to come. That didn't work out very well. But no, my life before that was not good, and like mostly internally. Like outside, it's like I had a good job, good family, everything, but inside, my heart was not good. My mind was in a bad place. Excuse me. I grew up as an Army brat, so we were moving every 2 to 3 years. So I just had the idea that everything was very temporary, short-term. Relationships only lasted for 2 years. You didn't keep in contact with anyone. And so it was like, as I would move, I would just have to try and make new friends. And it wasn't so bad when I was in the Army schools because they were used to it. So the new kid was the cool kid. So it wasn't bad. But then when my parents got divorced in '93, and we went back home, my mom to Minnesota, where she grew up. I ended up going from an Army school of like 40 kids in my class to a public school of 500 kids. And the new kid was not the cool kid. So I was like, as I got older, I realized I had depression before I went back to high school, but I was able to like hide it and cover it up and didn't really understand it because I had some friends, I played a lot of sports, and so I could like hide in that. But once I got to Minnesota, I became very isolated and there was no hiding, and the depression just grew and intensified. And then we continued moving around then too. So it was like 3 high schools I went to, and within 3 years. And still, I didn't make friends. None of them really cared for the new kid. And as you know, I'm kind of quiet and not very outgoing, so I didn't really push hard to make friends either. But then my junior year, it was like, I became really depressed. And that's when the suicidal thoughts began. And I was considering killing myself. We had some very tall, steep steps in our house, and I was standing at the top of the steps, and this thing about just dropping myself down it. But I was more afraid of hurting myself and not completing the task, and I didn't want to get injured. But then I found some people that did drugs, and so I started hanging out with them, and that helped out for a while. But anyone that does drugs knows it's only temporary cover-up. And so when that wasn't start working, I did take some pills a few times, made myself very sick, and then I ended up going to, excuse me, to psychiatric wards and rehabs, chemical rehabs. So over the 16, 18, I went to 4 different places. They didn't really help me quit. They just taught me the triggers and how to cope with things, how to avoid the situations and stuff like that. So like going through NA, I was able to stop using drugs. Basically, because I had met my wife, so I'll back up a little bit. And my wife in May of '97. She knew I was smoking weed, but she did not know about the cocaine or heroin for a couple months. And then she gave me an ultimatum. It was either me or the drugs. And at that point, we'd only been dating a couple months. She was my first girlfriend, and like, it's not gonna last that long. So it was like, I'll just quit the drugs for a little bit, have fun with my girlfriend, and when that ended, I could go back to the drugs. But luckily, 28 years later, we're still together. We've had our own families. premature. I remember when we had him, the nurse looked at me and said, "You're awfully pale, you should sit down." And my wife just kind of snaps at her, "He's always like that." And then we moved down here to Arizona from Minnesota because we pretty much got sick of the cold. And then growing up, living here, like I still was depressed. I was like, I didn't really tell my wife either. She didn't know. It was like, because I had learned not to handle the suicidal thoughts, so I wasn't going to kill myself, but I still wanted to die. I would just be driving on the 60, I see these other crashes, and I'd be sad because they didn't hit me. Or I was like hoping that maybe this will be the day that someone hits me, and stuff like that. And then in 2011, our marriage began to fall apart, mostly because I didn't really know how to love. Because I couldn't love myself, I was trying to love my wife. I'm sure my children probably felt it too, because I couldn't really relate to them. And I was there for them, but not emotionally. And then, in 2012, the very rock bottom of our marriage, like she had an affair, and then that's when the friend invited me to church. And so I did come, mostly because, like I said before, just to get her to stop. But when I came, like Pastor Dennis Slavin was guest speaking that day. I don't remember what he was talking about, but then at the very end, I'm sitting in the very back, and he just starts talking about broken marriages. And it felt like he's like staring right at me, and it's like, what the heck, dude? So it was like, it made me wonder, like, because it wasn't like the churches I went to before, because every now and then I would go, my mom would make me or something, and like, it was just a horrible experience. But this wasn't a bad experience. And it just made me question things. And then, so I told her it wasn't that bad and stuff like that, so she's like, "Oh, just come again next week and hear the actual pastor speak." So yeah, I came and pastor spoke and did great, as always. And I just kept coming, like, because things weren't making sense. My impression of Christians were horrible people. Like, they were very judgmental, rude. People would try to talk to me about God, and I would start cussing them out, and they just respond in kind. So like, you ain't no different than me. And so I kept coming, asking questions, trying to learn more about Jesus and who he is, and finding out that we're all just broken people. And so it was like, you can't expect them to be perfect. And then in July, I came to check out, we're doing Wednesday worship services every week then, and that's when we had the growth track was every Wednesday. So I came to check that out one time, and as I was driving, I decided, okay, I won't tell them I don't believe in God. They don't tell me you can't come no more, and to go home. All right, so then I don't have to worry about this more. So if that's any questions, it's done. So I get there, I walk in, and I meet Eric Williams. Like any of you know him, he's just a great guy. So I walked up to him and I was like, said hello and told him, I was like, I don't believe in God. He's like, okay. I'm supposed to kick me out. He tells me about the GO track, and I go and sit down with Matt Osborne. And, like, so Eric didn't kick me out. Matt's gonna kick me out. So can you help start the church? So I tell Matt, and he's like, okay. He's like, what is wrong with these people? I just went through the GO track, learned a lot about the church, Jesus, and people, and I just kept coming, kept asking questions. It's like everything that I had known about Christianity and Christians was completely wrong, false. Like, there are fake Christians out there, but for the most part, the truth of Jesus, they're true themselves. And then in September, I I asked Pastor if he had time for answer some questions, so we set a date and time, and we met. We talked for about an hour and a half, and at the end of that, I surrendered to Jesus. So that was a great journey. And but I still had the depression inside, and that wasn't changing much. Like my life was getting better, my mindset was slightly getting better. It didn't look so negatively, but I still had that desire I wanted to die. I still had a desire that I wanted to go back to drugs. But as I understood that if I did that, it would just make things worse. It's like when you go through like rehab, you learn that addiction, even if you're not using, addiction continues to grow. And like even though I hadn't used it for over 10 years, my addiction was probably worse if I started using it again. And then by January 2014, like our marriage, we had separated by that point. And I moved out, and the depression got worse. I began talking to a coworker about getting crack again, and I was thinking about committing suicide again. And then I ended up telling my coworker, no, I'll pass on the crack. But then in February, I ended up drinking and spent a week drinking. And at this time, we were doing First Wednesday. We had like a worship thing, and I ended up winning that. But then that March, I went, and Matt Osborne was speaking. I'm not sure what he was speaking about. I just kept hearing this thing, focus on Jesus. Focus on Jesus. And so at that point, I began to focus on him. And then I really started to feel Jesus in my life. My thoughts started changing. And everything's internally started to improve. And then the following year, in May 2015, we began the Freedom Group. And so I went through that. And if you haven't done Freedom, I highly recommend it. I mean, it's one of the best groups you can get. I went through it like 5 times, and I got something out of it every single time. But at the end, when you had the conference, we went to Carlsbad for it. And on the second day, I prayed for God to take the desire for drugs and the desire to die away from me. And he did. So since then, I've had like the joy of Christ has been in me. Like I don't want to die. I'm glad to live, to share my life with my family and with my friends. I don't even think about drugs anymore. So it's awesome. And then my wife, we did get divorced in 2016. And at that time, as I was in a men's group, and a friend asked me, he's like, do you see any chance of you guys getting back together? I was like, no, none at all. 6 months later, I messaged them to have dinner with them and told them, we're getting back together. And it's like that can restore relationships. And in 2021, she gave her life to Christ. We met with Pastor again and had a conversation with him, and then she surrendered to Jesus. And then in 2022, we were remarried. So God's good. He can restore relationships. My main life verse is Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious or worry about anything. Pray about everything. As someone that had very overthinks things and worries, that verse has spoken to me, and it's been very helpful. So find yourself a life verse, meditate it on it daily, and just draw close to Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you.